Hey, Kitchen Stewardship, Katie Kimball here. And I know a couple years ago, the plight of the bees was in the news. It seemed like all the time. And then the media stopped talking about it. So I think it's really important today to talk about this bee dying all the time thing. Like, is it old news? Is it still something we should worry about? And if it is, we got to get practical like we always do at Kitchen Stewardship about what we can do. So I have Carly Stein here from Beekeepers Naturals, and she's going to talk about what's going on, why it's important, and what we can do to help. Thanks for being here, Carly.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to talk about my favorite subject, the bees.
It is your favorite subject, but you haven't been like a beekeeper for very long. So where did all this passion come from?
Yeah, so I actually started beekeeping when I was in college. So I really started back in 2012. And I mean, I completely fell in love with the bees once I started beekeeping, but my passion for bees really started with my passion for bee products. I have an autoimmune condition, and for me, I was constantly sick, and it was when I was abroad in Europe that I used propolis, and that was my first kind of recovery experience. So I used bee products to radically change my health, and then when I started learning about the quality of bee products and how harsh it is to find good quality bee products in North America because of pesticides, I sort of took matters into my own hands and started beekeeping as a college student, and I fell in love with it from there.
I love that. Like, I can't find something that I want in the quality I want it, so I'll just do it myself. Like, that's just the best spirit. Now, like I said in the intro, I remember when colony collapse disorder kind of first came on the scene. And at that time, there were a dozen different theories about what was going on, right? From like GMOs to pesticides to pollution. So what's current? What's the research saying now? And how certain are we that we even have the right answer yet?
Yeah, so I mean, still there's not enough research in this area, but we have kind of seen people step up more and more. And the major culprit is pesticides. I mean, it's definitely a confluence of factors. Global warming plays into it. Our current agricultural practices, things like practices like monocropping, the industry around bees. It used to be kind of the beekeeping industry where people would care for and nurture bees to harvest their product and sell to companies like Beekeepers Naturals. But nowadays, most of the beekeeping industry, it works in commercial pollination. So that's, very different and a much harsher job for the bees. But the number one, in my opinion, is pesticides. And specifically in 2006, when we took DDT away, we started using something called neonicotinoid pesticides. And that class of pesticides are really destructive to the bees. It's a neuroactive substance, and it completely messes up their spatial reasoning.
Okay. So that's so interesting. I mean, we got rid of DDT because it was toxic, and we replaced it with something that's threatening our food supply. What is the risk? What's the potential if the honeybees aren't healthy, or if this problem gets worse, or even as it is now? How does it affect humans?
It's such a massive risk, and people kind of gloss over it because you don't think a honeybee could be have as much impact as it does, but it truly is critical to our environment. So bees pollinate 1/3 of our food supply. If we start losing the bees, we will have a massive food shortage. Not to mention just inflation on a lot of the healthy plant-based foods that we love would be kind of astronomical. So things like almonds, apples, if these things come into short supply, it drives up the price, and it makes it really hard for people to eat healthy. And then it's just the ripple effect on our ecosystem at large. So not only do bees pollinate all the foods, many of the foods that we eat, but they pollinate clover and alfalfa that, livestock graze on, and a lot of different plant life that other creatures rely on. So it really, like, the food chain is so delicate, and if you take the bees out of it, you're kind of removing a pillar, and it really would over time kind of crumble.
Yes, absolutely. And so how dire is it right now?
I think it's critically important that everybody kind of steps up and gets involved with the cause. And, there are things you can do. So it is important that people sort of turn their attention to this.
Yeah, so I'm all about action. Let's talk about that. What are some simple steps for just normal people like me that we can do? Like, I'm not going to be a beekeeper, but how can we help protect the bees and our food supply?
Yeah, so super simple. Number one way I like to tell everyone is just plant. Plant a garden. For me, I live in a small space, I'm in an apartment, but you can kind of see behind me, my windowsill is lined with plants. I have a balcony. I have a pollinator habitat on my balcony. So the simple act of planting for the bees, giving them access to clean food, and making sure that your seeds are heirloom or untreated. You want to make sure that the seeds you're planting are pesticide free. That's really important. But the whole thing is, the bees have lost access to clean food because everything is covered in pesticides. So if you can just have a little garden, It's giving them access to clean food. So it's a super supportive thing, not to mention it beautifies your surroundings, and it's so many different health benefits. Another thing is have impact with your purchases. Use your dollars to kind of take a stance. I know organic isn't always accessible, and organic isn't the be all and end all either. There are some issues there, but it's certainly better than the pesticide laden stuff that we have sort of spanning the grocery store. So to the extent you can support organic, small scale, local growers, if you have a farmer's market you have access to, that's a really wonderful thing to do. And then the last thing is just spread the word. People don't, like you just asked me, people don't realize the critical impact that the bees play. And the more people can kind of get involved with the cause, the more we can start to move towards a solution.
Yeah. So, okay, now I have some follow-up questions on like every single point you just made. You mentioned the seeds, and my jaw dropped internally. Do the neonicotinoids like stay in the seed and then contaminate the next plant?
Yeah. So this is so neonicotinoids are sort of two ways that they're used. Sometimes they're like classic pesticides that we all imagine, they're sprayed. Sometimes that happens. Other times, the seed will actually be dipped in neonicotinoids, and it's water soluble, so it grows up through the vascular system of the plant. So it's literally in the plant. You can't wash it off, which is really creepy.
Yeah, it is really creepy. Can bees tell the difference? Like if you have a contaminated flower next to a non-contaminated one, do they know what's clean?
We haven't done enough studies. Anecdotally, I can say that our bees, and I haven't really done this because we don't have pesticides around our bees intentionally, but they really do kind of gravitate to clean flower sources. I think what would happen if you were to actually test that and put a dirty one next to a clean one, they'd probably have a first forage at the dirty one. And once they realize that it was just contaminated product, sort of focus in on the clean.
Mm-hmm. And now, just to back up a little bit, you said neonicotinoids interfere with like the directional system of the bee. So it's not like it kills the bee, it just causes a breakdown in their society. Is that a fair explanation?
It causes a neurological breakdown. And again, like we don't have enough studies in this area. That's something that we're actually really working on at Beekeepers Naturals. We partner with UC Davis Bee Research. Yes. If you want to give to that charity organization, you can through our website. Another wonderful thing you can do to help support. So we really do need more research and funding in this area, and we're competing with big pesticide companies that have a lot of money to play with. So it's really hard, but again, just conversations like this, we're seeing a change. But anyways, to answer your question, so neonicotinoid, so it's a neuroactive substance. It's similar. It's similar conceptually to like nicotine, but it really does affect the bee's spatial reasoning. So it causes a neurological breakdown, and that's really bad because the bees rely on their spatial reasoning to forage for food, to find their way home, essentially to function. We've definitely seen with bees that are exposed to too much pesticides, they almost start seizing. And then the neonicotinoids too, I think it does lower their immune system. So we don't have a ton of studies in that area, but we do know that it causes a neurological breakdown, and we've seen a lot of negative effects as well.
Sure. And if a bee can't find their way home, I mean, that's it. They're like, they're not going to be able to contribute to the hive and make the honey and go out again the next day to do the same thing.
Totally. And something to remember that's really scary, but just important to be aware of, this is a water soluble substance, right? So it's getting into our soil, it's getting into our water supply, and we know what it does to a tiny bee, but we don't know the long-term effects it has on our health or other creatures.
Right. Yes, I know. That's why I always say, like, if something hasn't been tested for decades, we're all part of the experiment, unfortunately, and I don't like it at all. Now, organics cannot have neonicotinoids in any way, shape, or form?
So a little tricky. Organic is the perfect benchmark. The other thing that you see is all the time pesticides with runoff, water runoff. When they're sprayed, the wind can carry them, so you definitely can get exposure. But with organic, with pesticide-free, with local, for me, with my produce, and I can't always do this at all, but if I'm in LA and I can go to the farmer's market, I always love to have a conversation with the growers to try and sort of prevent that. But organic, you're taking better steps.
Right. At least you're not funding new pesticides being put into the environment.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the perfect product because of cross-contamination, which totally stinks. It's like someone else coming into your house and spreading glitter all over. Like,
exactly.
Can't avoid it. If I'm at the farmer's market and I ask a farmer, like, hi, do you use neonicotinoids? Are they going to know what that means? Or are there some other more common words we should be throwing out there at the poor farmers?
Yeah, they might not. I would just talk about what sort of pesticides they're using, if they're using organic or natural or, plant-based pesticides instead of the traditional ones.
Okay.
Some of them do pesticide-free, which is awesome.
Right.
But just having that kind of conversation.
Yeah, there's not like a trade name or something like that everyone would recognize.
There's like a few different brands that people would use that are chemical based, but I just usually talk to them about pesticides generally.
Sure thing. So before we end, do you want to quickly tell our kitchen stewardship readers about the quality of your honey? Because we love our natural sweeteners and trying to take baby steps toward better nutrition here.
Oh, you're frozen.
Oh, you're frozen.
Am I still frozen?
You're good now. And the honey is not frozen, everyone, but it is really amazing.
Yes, I can definitely talk about our honey. So my company, Beekeepers Naturals, we make sustainably sourced bee products. So we're all about bringing the highest quality bee products to you and getting away from pesticides. And we do that, one, for our product quality, but two, so we can have impact with the bees. So we can keep our bees far away from the substances that are hurting them. But we're the only bee product company that practices third-party pesticide testing. So when we harvest our honey, our propolis, whatever it is, before it goes into that jar or bottle, we send it to our lab and we test for every pesticide, toxin, and pollutant in accordance with Health Canada, which is more rigorous than the US. And only after that do we make our products with it. So we're able to hold ourselves to a really high standard, and we're able to create an environment that's conducive to success for the bees.
Yes, and it's beautiful. I had to grab this little jar of clover honey, and it's so fun. Like the clover honey is really light, and then the buckwheat honey is really, really dark. And so if you are at all a honey connoisseur, like this is the place to check out for sure. Thank you so much, Carly. I know this is going to be really helpful for all our kitchen stewardship readers. And I mean, the point is, share it, pass it on, talk to friends, plant some flowers. Even if you have a brown thumb like me and they might be dead by the end of the summer, like plant them anyway.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yep.